Hello guys, welcome to part 8 of our unit on GI surgery. Before I move on with the lecture, I'd like to add a disclaimer that I do not own any of the pictures or illustrations I've used in this video. Now we're going to be talking about esophageal carcinoma. The definition is pretty straightforward. It's a neoplastic change or malignancy of the cells or tissues in the esophagus. Morphologically, we mainly see two types of carcinomas in case of the esophagus, mainly the adenocarcinoma and squamous cell carcinoma. As we already know, adenocarcinoma is the malignant transformation of glands. But normally, there are no glands in the lining epithelium of esophagus, since the normal lining epithelium of the esophagus is non-keratinized squamous epithelium. It would look something like this. But we do know that at around the lower third of the esophagus, in cases of reflux disorders, we can see a metastasis into non-ciliated columnar epithelium, which consists of goblet cells. And that lining epithelium is glandular. Hence, we can conclude that for an adenocarcinoma to occur, a prerequisite would be that there has to be some sort of reflux disorder like a GERD. And since a reflux disorder such as GERD should be there, we can say that an adenocarcinoma is commonly seen in the lower third of the esophagus. Another point to remember is that it's the most common type of esophageal carcinoma in the West. Squamous cell carcinoma is the most common esophageal carcinoma in the entire world. Since the entire lining epithelium is squamous cells, it's commonly seen in the middle and the upper third of the esophagus. Risk factors of an esophageal carcinoma. Simply put, it can be anything that irritates the esophageal lining. We can consider that as a risk factor. Anything that irritates the esophageal lining, we can consider it as a risk factor. So that would include alcoholism and smoking, consumption of really hot beverages, which is why this condition can be seen a lot in Asia and the Middle East. Achalasia cardia, what happens here is due to accumulation of the food, that food ends up rotting, and that could irritate the lining epithelium as well. Additionally, it can also happen in case of an esophageal web. That's again pretty much the same principle as an achalasia cardia, where due to the web, suppose these in the red are the web, that would result in accumulation of the food right here, and that would again irritate the lining epithelium. Or another risk factor could be a direct injury to the esophagus. Clinical features. These patients usually present pretty late in the course of their disease. And when they do present, the presenting symptoms are usually dysphagia, weight loss, pain, and blood and vomit, that is hematemesis. Additionally, in case of a squamous cell carcinoma specifically, we may also see cough and hoarseness of voice. The hoarseness occurs when the malignancy manages to reach the recurrent laryngeal nerve, and the cough mainly occurs when the malignancy manages to involve the trachea. Now, over time, these malignancies can gain additional mutations and metastasize. So, metastasis is mainly lymphatic. So, the upper third of the esophagus, we can see the metastasis into the cervical lymph nodes. The middle third of the esophagus mainly involves the mediastinal or tracheobronchial lymph nodes, and the lower third can involve the celiac and the gastric lymph nodes. Additionally, we may also see local and blood spread as well. Now let's move on to investigations. Mainly the investigation of choice in order to confirm the condition would be an endoscopy and biopsy, but I would still recommend that you do a barium swallow so that you have an idea about the general area of the malignancy. So what I mean is, if the carcinoma or the tumor is somewhere around here, it's good, then we can directly go for endoscopy and biopsy later on. But suppose the cancer was somewhere at the top, and instead of doing a barium swallow first, you directly went to do an endoscopy, we could perforate the esophagus potentially, which is why it's recommended that you do a barium swallow first, get a general idea of the tumor, like the general idea of the location of the tumor, and then go to do an endoscopy and biopsy. Now, investigation specifically done for staging of the tumor. If we are doing an investigation to do a staging for all the three, tumor, the lymph node, and metastasis, that is TNM together, the investigation of choice would be a contrast enhanced CT, CECT. If we only want to do a TNN staging, then we could do an endoscopic ultrasound, and if you want to only check for the metastasis, then we can do something known as an 18 FDG PET scan, where FDG stands for fluorodeoxygenase glucose. Management. Now, it's a known fact that squamous cell carcinomas show a pretty good response to chemo and radiotherapy. But in case of an esophageal carcinoma, we cannot use chemo and radiotherapy as a mainstay treatment because of the close association of the esophagus with the heart and the lungs. We can though use chemo and radiotherapy as an adjuvant. So the main treatment of choice in case of an esophageal carcinoma stays surgery. And the surgeries that we mainly use is the Ivor-Lewis esophagectomy and McKeown's esophagectomy. Now let's discuss about the surgery. Suppose this is the esophagus, followed by the stomach, and the tumor is somewhere around here. Now the end aim of this surgery is to cut this part out. Okay. After doing that, you will have this gap, and then approximate these two ends and anastomose them. That's the end game of this surgery. But how do we move about to do this? Let's talk about that specifically. Now to do this, now to perform this surgery, there are certain limitations which we have to take care of first before doing it. It's that the esophagus and the stomach are actually fixed. So our first aim would be actually to mobilize them. So firstly, we will mobilize the stomach with the help of a laparotomy. Then we will mobilize the esophagus with the help of a thoracotomy. So what we have done here is we have mobilized both the esophagus and stomach. After this, now that the esophagus and the stomach have been mobilized, so now the esophagus and stomach have been successfully mobilized. What we then do is we take a safe margin and cut the section out which had the tumor. We basically take a safe margin in order to prevent a recurrence of the condition after the surgery, basically to prevent the resurgence of the tumor after the surgery. Then we have something like this, and since both the stomach and esophagus are mobilized, we can then move this mobilized stomach up towards the esophagus and then successfully anastomose the two ends. So we will end up with something like this at the end. Right. So basically, this surgery is a two-step surgery. That is, the Ivor-Lewis esophagectomy is a two-step surgery where we first do a laparotomy followed by a thoracotomy. And once we have mobilized the stomach and the esophagus, we take a safe margin and we cut out the tumor part of the esophagus. And then we pull up the stomach towards the esophagus and then we anastomose the two ends. That's all about the Ivor-Lewis esophagectomy. But sometimes what happens is the tumor is way up there. Like, what I mean by that is the location of the tumor is too high. Like, instead of being somewhere around here, it's somewhere really up in the cervical, closer or in the cervical esophagus. So in that case, even if we follow this procedure and cut the section out, we can't really bring the stomach all the way up there. So we can't really bring the stomach all the way up there, even if we do a resection over here. So in such cases, it becomes necessary to remove the entire esophagus. So what we will do the same laparotomy and thoracotomy and mobilize the esophagus and the stomach. Additionally, we also aim towards mobilizing the cervical esophagus. How will we mobilize the cervical esophagus is that we have to do an additional, cervical incision. So simply put, this surgery is a three-step surgery in which the initial steps are the same as the Ivor-Lewis esophagectomy, where we do a laparotomy first, then a thoracotomy. Over here, additionally, we do another step, that is a cervical incision to mobilize the cervical esophagus, and then we can remove the entire esophagus. Now, as I previously told in clinical features, that these patients present pretty late. So in most of the cases, we can't really do any management whatsoever. So our main aim in such cases is palliative care. And the palliative care of choice is a stenting with the help of an expandable stent, as depicted in the picture right here. If we can't do stenting, then we can put our aim towards shrinking the tumor. We can shrink the tumor with the help of chemo or radiotherapy, or we could do laser ablation. or we could also do a cryoablation. And there's also the option of doing a photodynamic therapy. And that concludes this lecture.